In the middle of the North Atlantic, more than 1,000 kilometers from mainland Portugal, 9 volcanic islands rise from the ocean like the exposed bones of an ancient world. Here, the land was not shaped gently. It was lifted by fire, broken by earthquakes, softened by rain, and surrounded on every side by a sea that never truly rests. This is the Azores, a Portuguese archipelago scattered across the Atlantic, where the highest mountain in all of Portugal does not stand on the mainland but on Pico Island, rising 2,351 meters above the water. From a distance, the islands can look peaceful. Green slopes fall toward black cliffs. Cows graze behind stone walls. White houses sit under red roofs facing harbours where fishing boats return before the weather changes again. But the calm surface hides a more demanding truth. To live here is to accept that the ocean decides many things. The wind decides when boats can leave. The rain decides when fields can be worked. The volcanic stone decides where roots can grow. And the distance from the mainland decides how carefully every resource must be used. The people of the Azores have built their lives inside this rhythm, not by conquering the islands, but by learning where the land allows a path, where the sea opens a passage, and where the weather asks everyone to wait. On São Miguel, steam rises from the earth in Furnas, where geothermal heat still reminds the island that the ground is alive. On Pico, grapevines grow between walls of black basalt, protected from salt wind by thousands of stones stacked by hand. On Fayal, sailors once crossed the Atlantic and stopped in Horta, leaving painted marks along the marina before returning to the open sea. On Flores and Corvo, the westernmost islands, clouds move low across waterfalls, crater lakes, and steep green valleys that feel removed from the speed of modern Europe. The Azores are often described as wild, but wild does not mean empty. It means that life here has learned to stay alert. Morning begins quietly in the villages. Before the first strong light reaches the cliffs, the air is already wet with ocean mist. The smell of grass, salt, and damp stone moves through narrow lanes. In many places, houses are built low and solid, their walls made to endure wind and humidity rather than impress strangers. The roofs are angled against rain. The windows are modest. The streets curve with the shape of the land instead of forcing the land to obey a straight line. This is not architecture made for spectacle. It is architecture made for weather. Inside the houses, the day often begins with small routines that have survived because they are useful. Doors open early. Boots are placed near thresholds, still dark from last night's rain. Work clothes are chosen not for appearance, but for the simple fact that the Atlantic can turn a clear morning into a wet afternoon without asking permission. In the pasture land, dairy farming remains one of the important parts of island life. Cattle move slowly across fields divided by hedges, stone walls, and narrow rural roads. The grass stays intensely green because the islands receive frequent moisture from the ocean air. This green has become one of the visual signatures of the Azores, but behind it is a daily discipline. Fields must be maintained. Animals must be moved. Milking cannot wait for perfect weather. The island does not stop being practical simply because it is beautiful. Along the coast, fishermen read a different language. They watch the swell. They notice the direction of the wind. They know that a harbour can look calm while the outer water is already changing. Fishing in the Azores has never been only a job of strength. It is a job of timing, patience, and restraint. The Atlantic gives, but it does not give on command. Boats leave when conditions allow. Nets, lines, hooks, fuel, and engines all become part of a careful calculation. A mistake at sea is rarely private. It reaches the family waiting on land, the crew beside you, and the village that counts on the return. For generations, the ocean has shaped not only the economy here, but the posture of the people. There is a particular stillness in island communities that comes from living close to large forces. The sea teaches scale. The volcano teaches memory. The weather teaches humility. And isolation teaches that comfort is not the same thing as abundance. On Pico Island, this lesson is written directly into the ground. The volcanic soil is dark, hard, and stony. For many places, this would have been an obstacle too heavy to overcome. But on Pico, the stone became a tool. Farmers built long, low walls from black basalt, creating small enclosures known as currays. Inside these stone grids, grapevines are protected from wind and salt spray while still receiving warmth reflected from the rock. From above, the vineyard landscape looks almost like a map of human patience. Line after line of basalt stretches inland from the coast. Each wall carries the weight of hands that moved stone because the land offered no easier method. This is one reason the vineyard culture of Pico was recognized as a World Heritage landscape. It is not only beautiful, it is evidence of adaptation. The vines grow because people understood that the island would not become soft for them. So they built a system that worked with the hardness. In the Azores, survival often looks like this. It is not dramatic from the outside. There are no grand gestures. There is only the steady adjustment of human life to wind, water, stone, and distance. Even the food carries this logic. In coastal communities, fish remains close to daily life. In farming areas, dairy products, meat, and local crops reflect what the land can sustain. In volcanic zones like Furnas, the earth itself becomes part of the kitchen. There, meals can be cooked slowly underground using geothermal heat, sealed in pots and lowered into warm soil, where steam does the work over hours. The method feels unusual to visitors. For the island, it is another form of listening. Heat rises from below. People use it. The landscape speaks through temperature, and the community answers with a recipe. What makes the Azores compelling is not only the scenery, it is the way ordinary life continues inside scenery that constantly reminds people of its power. A road can pass between hydrangeas and suddenly reveal a crater lake. A pasture can end at a cliff where the Atlantic opens into a vast grey-blue distance. A quiet village can sit only a short drive from fumaroles, lava fields, or black volcanic beaches. The boundary between home and elemental nature is thin. People do not need to travel far to meet the forces that made the islands. They live among them, and yet daily life is not defined by fear. It is defined by routine. The farmer closes a gate. The fisher repairs a line. The baker opens a door before sunrise. The child walks to school under a sky that may change 3 times before midday. The old stone walls remain wet from the night, and the mountain above the island may appear or disappear behind cloud. This is how the Azores enter the human body, not as a postcard, as repetition, as weather, as work, as a kind of quiet agreement between people and place. On São Miguel, the island often begins with green. The color is not flat. It changes with altitude, with rain, with the angle of the sun, and with the shadow of passing clouds. Pastures fold over hills in layered curves. Narrow roads run between stone borders and hedges. Small villages sit near churches, fields, and coastal roads, their white walls standing against the deep green of the land. But São Miguel is not only fertile, it is volcanic. The island carries heat beneath its surface, and nowhere is this more visible than in Furnas. There, the ground breathes. Steam rises from fumaroles. Mineral water bubbles from hot springs. The smell of sulfur moves through the air. mixing with damp soil, wood smoke, and the coolness of the surrounding vegetation. For visitors, it can feel like a strange natural performance. For the people who live near it, it is part of the daily map. The earth has its own openings. Some places are crossed carefully. Some places are used. Some places are simply respected. In Furnas, one of the most distinctive food traditions is cozido das Furnas. The dish is not cooked over a stove in the ordinary way. Meat, sausages, vegetables and other ingredients are placed in a sealed pot, taken to geothermal cooking areas and lowered into holes in the hot volcanic ground. The food remains there for hours. No flame is visible. No kitchen fire needs to be watched. The heat comes from inside the island. When the pot is brought back up, the meal carries the slow pressure of earth, steam, and time. This is not a tourist invention built only for display. It grew from the conditions of the place. Where the ground gives heat, people use heat. Where the soil is damp and mineral-rich, people learn how it affects water, crops, and daily movement. A volcanic island is never just a backdrop. It enters the household. It enters the kitchen. It shapes the way time is measured. The same relationship appears across the archipelago in different forms. On Pico, stone organizes the vineyard. On São Jorge, cliffs and fajans shape farming and settlement. A fajan is a flat coastal area formed at the base of cliffs, often by lava flows or landslides. These narrow lands can be fertile, but they also sit in places where steep slopes remind everyone that access can be difficult and weather can isolate communities quickly. In some fajans, the ocean is close, the cliff rises behind, and the road is not simply a convenience. It is the line that connects daily life to the rest of the island. Living there requires a different sense of space. The land may be generous, but it is not wide. Paths matter. Storage matters. Maintenance matters. A broken road, a landslide, or rough seas can change the rhythm of a family's week. This is why island life often produces a strong attention to practical detail. A door latch must hold against wind. A roof must be checked after storms. Tools cannot be treated carelessly. Food is not only consumed, it is planned, preserved, shared, and protected from waste. Isolation does not always mean loneliness. Sometimes it means a heightened awareness of dependence. People depend on weather windows. They depend on neighbors. They depend on boats, roads, fields, animals, and tools that must remain functional. In places like the Azores, community is not an abstract value. It is a working system. The islands also carry the memory of departure. For centuries, people from the Azores migrated across the Atlantic, especially to North America, including the United States and Canada. The islands have long been tied to the wider ocean world through whaling, fishing, shipping, emigration, and return. This history means that many families hold two kinds of geography at once. There is the immediate geography of the village, the pasture, the harbour, the mountain. And there is the distant geography of relatives abroad, letters once sent across the sea, remittances, return visits, and stories of another life beyond the horizon. The Atlantic separates, but it also connects. In Horta, on File Island, this relationship with movement is visible at the marina. For generations, sailors crossing the Atlantic have stopped there. Many have painted images, names, flags, and messages on the harbour walls and pavement. The paintings are weathered by sun, salt, footsteps, and time. Some remain bright, others fade until they become part of the texture of the port. The marina is not only a service point for boats, it is a living archive of passage. Every painted mark is a small claim against disappearance. A vessel came here. A crew rested here. A crossing was made. Then the sea opened again. Fayal also carries a more recent volcanic memory. The Capelinhos eruption began in 1957 and changed the western edge of the island. New land was created. Ash covered homes and fields. Families were displaced. The event left behind a landscape that is still visually distinct from the green softness often associated with the Azores. At Capelinhos, the ground is more exposed, more grey, more lunar. The old lighthouse stands near the altered coast, a witness to how quickly volcanic force can redraw a shoreline. For the people of Fayal, the eruption was not a distant geological fact. It affected homes, work, migration, and the future of families. A volcano does not only shape rocks, it changes decisions. It can push people to leave. It can turn land into memory. It can make a community measure time in before and after. Across the Azores, this sense of geological time exists beside the small time of daily routine. A person may spend the morning moving cattle through green pasture, while beneath that pasture lies the deeper history of lava, uplift, collapse, and erosion. A fisherman may prepare a boat in a harbour built against black volcanic stone, while below the surface, submarine mountains continue into the Atlantic depths. The islands appear solid, but their origin is movement. Fire moved upward. Water wore edges down. Wind carried salt inland. Rain opened paths through slopes. People arrived and began the slow work of making homes inside forces that were older than memory. Children growing up in the Azores learn these things not always through formal explanation, but through repetition. They learn which clouds bring rain. They learn the smell of wet pasture. They learn that the sea can change colour when weather shifts. They learn which roads bend around cliffs, which beaches are stone, which fields become muddy after heavy rain, and which family tasks must be done before afternoon wind rises. The education of an island child includes landscape. It includes waiting. It includes helping. It includes seeing adults adjust plans without making drama from the adjustment. This is one of the quiet strengths of remote communities. They teach resilience through ordinary acts, not through speeches, through repeated contact with a limitation. A boat cannot leave. So the work changes. Rain begins. So the field waits. The mountain disappears behind cloud. So the path is judged with more care. There is no need to make nature into an enemy. Nature is the condition. It is the frame inside which life must be organized. In the Azores, this organization has a particular visual beauty because so much of it is handmade and cumulative. Stone walls do not appear in a single season. Terraced fields do not emerge from one decision. Harbours, paths, houses, chapels, fences, and gardens become layered through generations. Each generation receives the island slightly altered by the generation before it, then it adds repairs, adaptations, and new marks of use. The result is a landscape where human presence is visible but rarely overwhelming. The islands have not been erased by human life. They have been negotiated with. The negotiation can be seen in the way settlements often sit near useful ground, fresh water, access to the sea, or shelter from the harshest winds. It can be seen in the way cattle farming uses the wet green abundance of the islands. It can be seen in the way vineyards on Pico are protected stone by stone. It can be seen in the way harbours face the Atlantic with both openness and caution. And it can be felt in the pace of people who understand that the fastest route is not always the wisest one. The Azores do not reward impatience. They reward attention. Attention to weather. Attention to season. Attention to slope. Attention to animals. Attention to boats. Attention to the unspoken signals that make isolated life possible. That attention becomes a form of culture. It is visible in the hands. It is heard in the pauses between words. It is carried in the way people look at the sky before answering a simple question about tomorrow. The ocean around the Azores is not an empty blue surface. It is a deep migration corridor. More than 20 species of whales and dolphins have been recorded in the waters of the archipelago, either as residents or seasonal visitors. Sperm whales, common dolphins, bottlenose dolphins, pilot whales, and several baleen whales pass through or feed in these Atlantic waters. For a long time, this relationship between people and whales was not built around observation. It was built around whaling. The Azores had a whaling culture that developed with small boats, shore lookouts, and dangerous work carried out far from the safety of land. The old system depended on vigias, whale lookouts stationed on high points along the coast. From there, they scanned the sea with trained eyes, watching for blows, movement, and signs on the surface. When a whale was spotted, signals were sent to crews below. Men launched boats and rowed or sailed out toward the animal. The work demanded coordination, endurance, and knowledge of the sea. It also carried serious risk. A small boat beside a whale in the open Atlantic was never in full control of the event. Today, commercial whaling is part of the island's past. The relationship has shifted toward research, memory, and whale watching. But the old lookout posts still matter. They are reminders that island culture is rarely simple. The same sea that provided food and income also demanded danger. The same whale that once represented survival and economic necessity now represents ecological awareness and a different kind of value. This change did not erase history. It added another layer to it. In places like Pico and Fayal, whaling museums and old tools preserve part of that memory. Lances, boats, photographs, lookout stations, and oral histories carry the weight of a time when communities were tied to the whale through labor. To walk through that history is to see how survival ethics can change when conditions change. A past practice may have been necessary within one economy, then become unacceptable or unnecessary within another. Island life adapts not only to weather and soil, it adapts to moral knowledge. It adapts to new understandings of what should continue and what should be left behind. The sea remains central, but the human response to the sea evolves. For younger generations, whales may be encountered through binoculars, boats designed for observation, scientific guides, and strict respect for distance. The experience is still powerful because the scale remains unchanged. A whale surfacing near an island reminds the viewer that the Azores are not isolated dots in the ocean. They are part of a living Atlantic system far larger than the human map. Below the boats, the seabed drops into deep water. Currents move, fish gather. Cetaceans travel through channels where volcanic islands rise from the ocean floor. The life of the archipelago continues underwater in ways that most people never see. Above the surface, the islands hold another form of abundance. Rainfall, humidity, and volcanic soils support a lush vegetation that gives many valleys their intense green density. Hydrangeas line roads in blue and purple clusters during the flowering season. Cryptomeria forests climb slopes in some areas. Pastures stretch across rolling hills. Lakes fill volcanic craters, creating quiet basins where clouds and ridgelines reflect on still water. Cidades on São Miguel is one of the most famous examples. Its crater lakes sit inside a vast volcanic caldera surrounded by steep green walls. From high viewpoints, the landscape appears almost composed for the eye, but its beauty comes from rupture. A caldera is a collapsed volcanic structure. The peaceful lake is connected to an older violence of earth movement, eruption, and collapse. This is a recurring pattern in the Azores. The gentle surface often rests on a dramatic origin. A green pasture grows over lava. A village stands near a volcanic system. A quiet lake occupies the memory of collapse. A black beach marks where molten rock once met the sea. The islands do not hide their past completely. They soften it with moss, grass, water, and human use. For the people who live here, that combination of beauty and instability is not a contradiction. It is the normal condition of home. The same land that can shake also gives pasture. The same rain that makes roads difficult keeps fields alive. The same ocean that isolates the islands connects them to fish, migration, and maritime history. A life built here must hold opposing facts without needing to solve them. This is why the pace of the Azores feels different from places designed around constant expansion. On an island, scale is limited. Roads eventually meet the sea. Fields end at cliffs. Harbours open into weather. There is no endless inland to absorb every mistake. The horizon is large, but the ground underfoot is finite. That limit can produce care. It can also produce longing. Many islanders have left at different points in history because opportunity elsewhere seemed more possible than opportunity at home. Migration is one of the quiet themes of Azorean identity. The islands teach attachment, but they also teach departure. Families remain connected across oceans. A house may hold memories of grandparents who left. A village festival may bring back relatives from abroad. A surname may travel farther than the island itself. Departure does not always break belonging. Sometimes it stretches it. And when people return, even briefly, they return to a landscape that carries the body differently. The smell of wet grass, the sound of church bells in small settlements, the weight of cloud over a mountain, the sight of black stone beside blue water. These details become a kind of memory language. They do not need explanation. They are recognized before they are named. On Terceira, another island in the central group, human history is visible in streets, fortifications, churches, and the city of Angra do Heroísmo, recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its historical role in Atlantic navigation. Its urban form reflects centuries of maritime movement, trade, defense, and colonial history. Here, the Azores are not only remote nature, they are also part of a wider story of ships, empires, religious life, and Atlantic routes. The islands were points of passage. They were places to resupply, repair, govern, worship, and wait for favorable winds. The ocean made them remote, but it also made them strategic. This dual identity remains present. A village pasture and a world map can exist in the same story. A stone street can hold both local routine and global history. A harbour can be a workplace for fishermen and a memory of transatlantic crossings. This layered identity gives the Azores their documentary depth. They cannot be reduced to cliffs, whales, or green hills alone. They are made from the meeting of geology, labour, migration, faith, agriculture, weather, and sea. Faith has also shaped daily life across the islands. Churches stand at the centre of many communities. Religious festivals, processions, and local celebrations mark the calendar with shared ritual. In remote places, ritual often has a practical social function, as well as a spiritual one. It gathers people. It confirms belonging. It carries memory forward through repetition. Decorated streets, communal meals, music, and processions turn a village into a shared body for a few hours or days. These traditions are not separate from survival. They are one of the ways people endure distance. They make the year feel structured. They turn hardship into something held collectively. They remind the community that isolation is less heavy when time is shared. But behind every celebration, the islands remain demanding. Weather can cancel plans. Storms can strike in winter. Humidity can enter buildings. Salt can corrode metal. Landslides can affect roads. The same beauty that attracts travellers requires constant maintenance from those who stay. This maintenance is rarely cinematic in the obvious sense. It is the cleaning of drains, the repairing of walls, the cutting of vegetation, the checking of boats, the feeding of animals, the quiet inventory of what must be done before the next rain comes. A documentary eye must stay with these small tasks because they reveal the truth of living in a place. Large landscapes impress from a distance. Small tasks explain how people remain there. In the Azores, the ordinary gesture carries the scale of the environment. A hand closing a wooden gate is also a hand responding to wind, cattle, wet ground, and years of repeated use. A person stacking basalt in a vineyard is also answering salt, slope, and volcanic soil. A fisherman checking a line is also reading current, depth, and the memory of others who worked before him. Nothing exists alone. Every action belongs to a system. This is why the islands feel alive even when they are quiet. The silence is not emptiness. It is concentration. On Pico Island, the mountain changes the way the day feels. Pico is not only a landmark, it is a presence. When the sky is clear, its dark volcanic cone rises above the island with a form so simple and powerful that everything below it seems measured against that height. At 2,351 meters, Mount Pico is the highest point in Portugal. Its summit is often wrapped in cloud. Sometimes the mountain disappears almost completely, leaving only the lower slopes visible through shifting mist. Then, without warning, the cloud opens and the peak returns. For people living below it, this movement between visibility and concealment becomes part of daily perception. The mountain is there even when it cannot be seen. It shapes weather. It shapes orientation. It shapes memory. On the lower slopes and near the coast, Pico's black volcanic stone becomes the material language of the island. It appears in walls, houses, paths, vineyards, and shoreline formations. The stone is not decorative in its origin. It is what the island gives. It is heavy, sharp, porous, and abundant. Human life on Pico learned to work with that abundance instead of waiting for easier ground. The vineyard landscape is one of the clearest examples. Near the sea, vines grow inside small rectangular plots protected by basalt walls. These walls reduce the direct impact of Atlantic wind and salt spray. They also collect and reflect heat, helping grapes ripen in a climate shaped by ocean moisture. The result is a landscape that looks severe and delicate at the same time. Black stone holds green leaves. Wind passes over low walls. The sea is close enough to be felt in the air. The vines survive because the walls stand between them and the exposure of the coast. This kind of farming is not fast. It is not efficient in the industrial sense. It is slow, physical, and precise. A wall must be repaired when stone shifts. A vine must be tended within a small enclosed space. The worker must bend, step carefully, lift, prune, carry, and return. The geometry of the vineyard is built from repetition. From above, it looks almost abstract. From the ground, it is labor. That difference matters. Many landscapes become famous because they photograph well. But in the Azores, beauty often comes from work that was never designed for a camera. The basalt grids of Pico were built because the vines needed shelter. The shelter became pattern. The pattern became heritage. The heritage remains alive only if the work continues. If the walls are abandoned, the sea wind begins its slow removal. Salt enters, plants overgrow, stone loosens. The island does not preserve human effort automatically. It asks for renewal. Across the archipelago, renewal is part of everyday life. Because humidity, wind, salt, and rain act constantly, maintenance is not occasional. It is permanent. Metal rusts faster near the coast. Wood swells. Paint peels. Stone grows moss. Paths become slippery. Fields require drainage. Roofs require attention. The weather does not destroy everything at once. It wears things down patiently. In response, people develop a patient form of repair. This is one of the hidden rhythms of island survival. A community remains standing not because it avoids damage, but because it returns again and again to small acts of correction. The fence is fixed. The boat is checked. The wall is rebuilt. The field is cleared. The engine is listened to. The window is sealed. The tool is put away before dampness reaches it. These acts are not dramatic, but they are the foundation beneath the postcard image. Without them, the green hills and quiet villages would not remain livable. On the smaller and more remote islands, the meaning of maintenance becomes even sharper. Flores in the western group receives the Atlantic with a landscape of waterfalls, cliffs, crater lakes, and dense vegetation. Its name means flowers, and the island's wet climate supports a lushness that can feel almost overwhelming. Water moves everywhere. It falls from high green walls. It gathers in lakes. It runs through valleys. It hangs in the air as mist. This abundance of water creates beauty, but it also demands care. Roads and paths must deal with slope and rain. Vegetation grows quickly. Clouds can reduce visibility. A place rich in water is also a place where erosion never stops working. On Corvo, the smallest island of the Azores, isolation becomes more intimate. The land area is limited. The population is small. The caldera dominates the island's interior. To live on such a small island is to understand that every connection matters. Transport matters. Weather windows matter. The arrival of supplies matters. The departure of a boat or aircraft is never just a schedule. It is part of the island's breathing. When connections are interrupted, people adjust. This adjustment is not always spoken of as hardship, because it is part of the known condition. The island teaches expectation without certainty. Plans exist, but the weather has authority. The body learns patience not as a virtue displayed for others, but as a practical skill. This practical patience can be seen in how people move through the day. In many villages, the morning does not carry the noise of large cities. There is less rush, but not less work. The quiet can be misleading. Behind it are tasks that begin early and return every day. Animals must be fed. Bread must be baked. Coffee must be served. Fishing gear must be handled. Gardens must be tended. Older houses must be aired against dampness. Roads must be driven with care because curves, fog, and steep drops are part of ordinary movement. Children grow inside this rhythm. They inherit not only stories, but techniques. How to close a gate so wind does not open it. How to walk on wet stone. How to read a sky that changes by the hour. How to recognize when the sea looks wrong, even if the harbor is calm. How to understand that a small island does not forgive carelessness simply because it feels familiar. This is where the Azores become more than a scenic destination. They reveal a form of intelligence shaped by limits. Modern life often treats convenience as progress. The islands show something older. They show that attention can be a survival system. They show that beauty does not remove difficulty. They show that remoteness can protect a way of seeing, but it can also narrow the margin for error. A farmer on a wet hillside, a sailor watching cloud, a woman airing linens in a stone house, a worker repairing a basalt wall, a guide scanning the sea for whales, a child waiting for weather to clear. None of these figures needs to be turned into a hero. Their lives are already connected to forces large enough to give every gesture weight. The Azores do not ask for exaggerated language. They do not need it. The facts are strong enough. 9 volcanic islands. An Atlantic distance that separates them from mainland Europe. A mountain higher than any in Portugal. A sea crossed by whales. Vineyards built from black stone. Villages living with humidity, wind, rain, and memory. This is the power of the place. It lets the ordinary remain ordinary while the environment around it stays immense. As evening comes, the islands often change temperature before they change colour. Mist settles into fields. Clouds collect around high ground. The sea darkens beyond the cliffs. In villages, lights appear one by one, softened by moisture in the air. The day's work does not end with a dramatic conclusion. It narrows into smaller sounds. A gate closing, a motor fading along a road, dishes being moved inside a kitchen, rain beginning again on roof tiles. The Atlantic remains outside every window, even when it cannot be seen. For the people who live here, that presence is not a symbol. It is part of the structure of the day. It affects what can be planted, when boats can leave, how houses are built, what foods are preserved, and how families imagine the future. The islands hold people close, but they do not make life simple. They offer green land, but not easy land. They offer ocean, but not predictable ocean. They offer silence, but not emptiness. And inside that balance, the Azores continue. At night, the Azores become less visual and more audible. The cliffs lose their outlines. The fields become dark masses behind low walls. The ocean continues to move beyond the edge of the village, and its sound reaches inland in waves of pressure and release. In a city, darkness often hides distance. On these islands, darkness reveals it. There is the house, the road, the harbour light, the church tower, the mountain if the sky is clear. Then there is the Atlantic, vast, surrounding, patient. This is the final truth of living on Europe's wild Atlantic islands. The landscape is beautiful because it is alive, but that life is not arranged for human comfort. The islands give pasture, fish, grapes, geothermal heat, rainwater, shelter, and routes across the ocean. But every gift comes with a condition. The grass grows because the air is wet. The vineyards survive because stone walls stand against salt and wind. The harbours function because people read the sea before trusting it. The houses endure because they are maintained against dampness, corrosion, and storm. The villages remain because generations have accepted the slow discipline of repair. In the Azores, endurance is not a single act. It is a system. It is the daily knowledge of where to build, when to wait, how to store, what to mend, and how to move when the weather changes. It is a way of seeing the world that does not separate beauty from responsibility. A crater lake is beautiful, but it is also a volcanic memory. A green field is beautiful, but it requires labour. A whale surfacing near a boat is beautiful, but it belongs to a living ocean that must be approached with restraint. A remote island village is beautiful, but its quiet depends on roads, boats, supplies, neighbours, and careful routines that outsiders may never notice. This is why the Azores cannot be understood only through scenery. The scenery is the doorway. The deeper story is how people have learned to remain here without pretending the islands are easier than they are. They do not erase the volcano. They cook with its heat. They do not flatten the stone. They build with it. They do not command the ocean. They watch it. They do not escape the rain. They organize life around it. This is not a life outside the modern world. The Azores have roads, airports, internet, tourism, research, schools, and connections to the wider Portuguese and Atlantic world. But beneath those modern layers, an older relationship remains visible. Land and sea still set the terms. The weather still enters the calendar. Distance still matters. A mountain can still disappear behind cloud and change the feeling of an entire day. A storm can still remind everyone that the island is small and the ocean is not. And yet, the people stay. They stay through work. They stay through family. They stay through festivals, migration memories, repaired houses, tended fields, fishing knowledge, vineyard walls, and the quiet pride of belonging to a place that asks for patience before it gives trust. The Azores do not offer the illusion that nature is only peaceful. They offer something more honest. They show that peace can exist beside difficulty. They show that isolation can create both hardship and depth. They show that a small community, when shaped by wind, rain, fire, and sea, can carry a kind of knowledge that large places often forget. As dawn returns, the islands begin again. Mist lifts from the pastures. The first boats move in the harbour. Steam rises from volcanic ground. Cattle lower their heads into wet grass. Basalt walls hold the vines in place. Clouds gather around Pico, then break for a moment, revealing the mountain before hiding it again. Nothing here stays completely still. Not the weather, not the ocean, not the land beneath the surface, not the people whose lives continue through adjustment after adjustment, but within that movement there is continuity. A gate is opened, a net is checked, a pot is lowered into warm earth. A stone is placed back into a wall. A child learns the road home through fog. A family listens to rain on the roof and knows what the morning may require. This is the quiet strength of the Azores, not a spectacle of survival, but a daily agreement with an island world. A place where human life remains small enough to respect the landscape and strong enough to keep returning to it. And perhaps that is why these islands stay in the mind after the journey ends. Not because they are untouched, but because they show what touch can mean when it is careful. Not because they are remote, but because distance has preserved a slower understanding of place. Not because life here is easy, but because against wind, stone, rain, volcano, and ocean, life here continues with a calm that does not need to explain itself. If this journey has stayed with you, continue walking with us toward the world's quieter edges. There are still islands, mountains, deserts, forests, and forgotten coastal villages where people live close to the forces that shaped them. And in those places, far from the noise of easy answers, the earth still teaches in a language older than words. The next journey begins where the road becomes narrow, where the weather decides the pace, and where human life still listens before it moves.